Okay, I am recording the class now. Let us start. Okay, so I will go a little bit fast today because we are a little bit lagging behind. Anyway, so continuing with the disaster profile of India. So in the screen here, you see places where you can see the disaster or hazards of landslide very frequently. So where are these places? So these places are in the areas where the mountains and the hills are more predominant. So you can see the red areas, there are the most or very high landslide hazard zones, mostly in the Himalayan foothills or the Himalayan regions, and then also it is towards the northeastern part. And then in the peninsular region, it is more predominant where we have some of the hills of the Aravalli region as well as the Western Ghats. And then here you see these areas are moderate to low, these yellow areas, and then some sporadic areas of high prevalence are there, which are already shown by this dark blue color. Okay, the northeast part of India, including Arunachal Pradesh, then Sikkim, and then in the Uttarakhand, and then towards Kashmir. And then pretty much unlikely places are one with a little less bluish areas, okay? And then you don't have snow covered areas which are not being shown. Some parts only in Kashmir are shown there. So, okay, so landslides mainly affect the Himalayan region of the Western Ghats in India, as it is written here. They're also common in the Nilgiri range. So, where are the Nilgiri range? As you now know, these towards south, the places where the East Ghat and the Western Ghat range of mountains meet, okay? So there is an incident where it is cited 1978 alone, unprecedented rains in the region triggered about 100 landslides. So it is very common in the western Ghats as well as towards the southern part of India, not only in the Himalayan region. Okay, and then tea gardens are also there, so people witness a lot of these landslides because they cut the slopes, the natural slopes, in order to grow tea. Then the Himalayan regions, it is very predominant, and it is shown the rough estimate of monetary loss is in the order of 100 to 150 crore per annum. So that is the amount of money that is lost directly or either indirectly because of landslides in India as a whole. Okay, so then the next disaster is a silent disaster, or it is also known as a slow onsetting disaster, which is known as droughts. So we all know what droughts is, but droughts has also its different categories. So drought is basically whenever we have to talk about drought, we should be referring to the definition given by IMD or Indian Meteorological Department. So it says that is defined as a situation occurring in any area when the mean annual rainfall or the average annual rainfall is less than 75% of the normal rainfall. So if you have a historical data of rainfall for over 30 years, then you can calculate what is the average rainfall. And then for a particular year, the average annual rainfall is deviated by 75% for the particular year, then you can say that that particular year is actually a drought year. So drought is, as you see, there are different categories of drought. So we will discuss these three. One is known as meteorological drought, hydrological drought, and agricultural drought. What is a meteorological drought? Meteorological drought is defined as a deficiency of precipitation. So you only look at the rainfall, not any other parameters. Okay? And then it usually precedes other kinds of droughts. So this is the first kind of drought. That means whenever there is lack of rainfall, we will first notice it, and then the other categories of droughts will follow, whatever drought you want to define. Okay? So it says that kinds of droughts are said to occur when the seasonal rainfall received over an area is less than 25% of its long-term average value. It is actually classified as moderate drought if the rainfall deficit is 26 to 50% within this range, and severe if it is more than 50%. So within the meteorological drought, you look at the long-term average, and then accordingly you can categorize it according to moderate or severe or uh, any other. Okay, if it falls within these three categories. If the deviation is less than 25%, within 26 to 50%, or more than 50%. Okay, so this, in order to find whether an area is frequented by meteorological drought or not, we will simply look at the rainfall data, then followed by hydrological drought. So hydrological drought is defined as the deficiencies in surface and subsurface water, leading to a lack of water for normal and specific needs. So if there is a lack of rainfall, then you will first notice the meteorological drought, and then you will also see hydrological droughts and its effects. So what is a hydrological drought? That means you do not have water underground for your use. So normally, if you go to some of the urbanized areas, particularly in Guwahati city also, in the winter seasons, you will notice that many areas nowadays they have to buy water, and that means since we are heavily dependent on the groundwater is exploited or it is taken out most of the time, and then there is a deficit of groundwater, and that is actually an example of a hydrological drought. Okay, so it happens only mostly in the winter seasons where there is a devoid of rainfall. That means in winter season, that is the meteorological drought normally sets in, and then it is followed by hydrological drought. And then there is another kind of drought that is known as agricultural drought, which is usually triggered by meteorological and hydrological drought. That means if both these droughts set in, and then obviously this effect will be seen in the agricultural productivity, and that is termed as agricultural drought. It is usually triggered by meteorological and hydrological drought and occurs when soil moisture and rainfall are inadequate during the crop growing season. So if during the monsoon season or during the month of April you do not have enough rainfall, then what will happen? Your crops will suffer. Okay, the productivity will suffer throughout the entire season, and then it will be reflected in your productivity, which is actually termed as agricultural drought. Okay, so India is one of the countries where drought is very, very frequent. In fact, you see, the most of the countries, there are some effects of drought which is being felt. So in this map, you see towards the states in Gujarat, then Rajasthan, and then towards the western part of India, 24, 21, and 25. These areas are chronically drought-prone areas. And then some places which is not in green color, these are frequently drought-prone areas. And then these green-colored areas are actually not that much drought affected, but climate change scenarios have set in, and then this picture is somehow nowadays questionable. Okay, so we have a good record of drought seasons, and starting from 1800, you see the years where India has suffered drought. So for the first 30 years, 6 drought years are being recorded. These are the years. And then the next 30 years, around 5. The next 30 years, 6. And then during the period of 1891 to 1920, there were 10 years of severe droughts which were recorded. And then these droughts were during the time when India was under still the British rules, and then people were suffering very heavily. Even after independence, this record is still there. So till 2010, you see there are 4 years. So these are the very severe cases of drought records which are in the database. Okay. Okay, so together with the drought, we have some very unique kind of disasters which are known as heat waves. So heat waves, I don't have to really explain what a heat wave is. Heat wave is a prolonged period of excessively hot weather which may be accompanied by high humidity, especially in the oceanic climatic countries. So even in India, heat wave is very prevalent, particularly in the states such as Andhra Pradesh and then Delhi and then Orissa, where you have the coastal region, not the Delhi I'm saying, but in particularly those coastal areas where you have high humidity together with the subtropical climate. Okay, so there is a definition. So it says, according to IMD, the heat wave is qualified when air temperature of at least 40 degrees centigrade in the plains or greater than 30 degrees centigrade in the hilly regions occur. So that is a kind of definition you can refer to. And then it says for INT classification of heat waves, temperatures greater than 46 degrees centigrade are considered and classified as severe heat waves. So nowadays, now the summer season is setting in, and then you see that 46 degree is quite normal in many of the states in India, especially in Delhi or in Rajasthan, where sometimes temperature shoots up to even 50 degrees centigrade. So these are extreme cases of heat waves. And then the consequences of heat waves are very severe. As you can see, people can faint, people can collapse, and then even within the houses also there are air conditioners which are not enough to sustain or accommodate a cool temperature. So there are cases of extreme heat waves which are now growing. So there is a record of number of heat wave deaths since 1992. This is from NIDM or NDMA. So you see, the particular years in 2015 there were almost 2,500 cases, and then 1995 almost 1,700 cases of people dying because of heat wave alone in India. Okay, so for the time being, that is what is due to heat wave and then drought. But tsunami also is quite a big natural disaster in India, as in your memory, or at least in my memory, that I can tell or refer to, is the big Indian Ocean tsunami that came in 26 December in 2004, and that was by an earthquake which came in the region of Sumatra, okay, near Indonesia, the southern part of Indonesia, and then uh, casualty was immense in terms of lives and property loss in the entire Indian Ocean countries. And then, this is not only the only tsunami that India has experienced. There are cases or incidences where it is shown in the slide. You can see 1945, I'm going from up, in 1941, 26 June, that is an Andaman earthquake. So all the tsunamis are mostly because of either an earthquake or because of an eruption of a volcano, that the volcanic lava, and then mostly by the earthquakes. So these are some of the examples that India was affected, starting from 1762. 12th April. The tsunami, by the way, is a Japanese word which translates literally into harbor waves. Okay? So in Japan, it is quite frequent. Then this name is taken from the language tsunami. Okay, so this is all about our disaster database cases of India. I think we want to quickly skip this part, because the next I want to show here is some of the discussions in relation to your third module, that is the disaster impacts. Okay, so everyone, I hope, can you see the screen here? Can you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, good. So disaster impacts means the impacts after a disaster. So there are different categories of disaster impacts, and then these impacts vary depending on various factors. So disaster impacts are classified normally in some of the categories, such as your physical impact, or then your societal impact or social impact, then economic impact, and psychosocial impact or psychological impact. So accordingly, there may be different case studies which are already there in many sources. You can also refer, but I will just simply touch a very basic part of these examples. Okay? Disaster impacts. So first of all, before we really go into the disaster impacts, let us see the disaster statistics. So I don't know. I haven't really taught you this thing, that there are some disaster databases which are online available. Anyway, I'll be showing you those things. So disaster database means there are some agencies or organizations which keep a record of disaster whenever it happens, and then the associated casualties. So that maybe in terms of lives lost, or in terms of the property damage, in terms of monetary values, or injuries, or infrastructural damage, or the crop loss. So one of the very renowned database, or one of the very comprehensive or big database, is also known as EMDAT. So here, you see the name here on the screen, EMDAT. Okay. So EMDAT, even if you go to Google and then type EMDAT, this will lead you to this database. So in this database, you can find the disaster statistics of various countries across the globe. So EM database is created quite new, means after 1900, but in this slide, some of these statistics are being taken from EM date, and then there are some other organizations from where these disasters incidences or the statistics are taken, and then it is showing a curve of disasters which actually have been happening since 1900 all across the globe. So this is a global figure that you are seeing. Okay, so since 1900, and then on the Y scale you see the number of occurrences or the frequency of disasters. So okay, so what actually is a disaster? That is also questionable, as you by the definition, as you already know, that a hazard when it crosses the life in an adverse way, it disrupts normal activities of life, is a disaster. But in order for this disaster to be recorded, these disaster databases, they have their own criteria. And by saying so, it means that EM database only records a particular incident as a disaster if there are a certain number of people which are being killed, or if a country invites international agencies' help, or a few criteria are there that I will be explaining a little late. But for the time being, just we remember that this is the figure or a curve that shows the disasters happening all across the globe. So starting from 1900, so you see the figure is growing up gradually. 1900, 1904, 1908, 1912, and then in every decade up till 1950, there was really the slope was quite flat. But since 1958 or 1960, you see a sharp rise in the incidences. So, what may be the reason, according to you? You see, there is an exponential growth since 1960. That means the world is witnessing more and more disasters. You can say towards the last 50 years period than it has actually seen in its entire period of history, recorded history. Uh, so some of the salient points from this curve is shown here. The first one, it says that number of disasters in the period of 2000 to 2005. Again, you look at the table that has been shown on below. So it is a record of I think 5 years or 10 years, 1990, 2000, almost 10 years, one decadal data is there. So the last extreme end is from 2000 to 2005. So you see 4,850 number of disasters happening in that particular 5 years. When you look at the other decades, these numbers are very small. So this is a reflection of the same thing that is shown in the graph. So it says that number of disasters in the period of 2000 to 2005 is more than the ones in the 1900s. So entire 1900, if you combine cumulative total, is less than this particular 5 years disaster record. Then again, the number of disasters recorded in the first half of the last century is only 6% of the total disasters in the past 105 years. So since 1900 to 2004, 105 years. It says that the first half of the last century, whatever number of data is recorded, is only 6% of the total disasters. 62% of the disasters in the past 108 years occurred in the past 15 years alone. So this 15 years is calculated from 2005 and then back. Okay. So all these figures and the statistics are actually pointing to one thing, that is what? The disasters are exponentially increasing entire on the entire globe or the entire planet. So the reason is very difficult at first glance to say to a particular one region, but partly the reason is due to a change in the climate. So the climate change as it is happening, the factors which are triggering these disasters are increasing, and so the frequency of these disasters are increasing. This is the first cause. Then number two is we see an explosion of population at the same time. So the total number of population the world had since 1900, suppose 1950, was much smaller than the population that we have now. So we have around 7.3 billion people on the planet. So this is a huge number, 7,300 million number of people all across the planet. And then the entire region of the South Asian countries, they bear almost one-sixth of that population. India, China, India, Bangladesh, then Nepal, all the South Asian countries, we are one of the densely populated areas where people are living. So if the hazards are increasing due to climate change, and at the same time, people are also exploding in terms of their population growth, so these hazards are quite frequently now crossing the lives and the society in a fashion that was unprecedented, or it didn't happen earlier. So that is why this number of disasters, one can say, are increasing. So this is the second cause. The first one is that climate change is the contributing factor. Number two, population is increasing. People are encroaching into areas where there are more and more number of hazards occurring where earlier people didn't used to settle. Number three is the record of these disasters are also increasing. That means there are instruments which are more sophisticated nowadays, which can detect earthquakes at the bottom of the ocean, okay, or which can increase or which can record glacier lake outburst on the top of some mountains or on the top of some glaciers where earlier people didn't have the means to go and then record. So with the advancement of technology, these disaster records are also increasing. That means somewhere earlier, now the globe is becoming one small village. There were some incidences, but that was not recorded. But now the recording is better. Okay, so due to these three criteria or three reasons, we see this graph actually going up and up and up in an exponential fashion. 1970 or 1960s, mid of 1960s, you can say. Okay, okay. Then you see in terms of the seven continents, one, two, three, four, five, six, one, two, three, four, five. Okay, so five continents: Africa, America, Asia, Europe, and Oceania. So, what kind of disasters are more prevalent than where actually the disasters are occurring? So, this data is also being taken from EMDAT. So, you see source EMDAT available at www.emdat.net. So, you can also go and visit this. Sometime if I get uh, scope, I'll show you here how you can download data from EMDAT. Okay, so this gives an overall picture of what kind of disasters. If you were talking about biological disasters, okay, maybe epidemics. So HIV/AIDS was one of the major factors that took lives. So you see, there were most of the countries are from African region. Okay, so this database is coming mostly from African region compared to Europe or Asia. That is followed by Asia. Then again, earthquakes and tsunamis, where it is happening more, it is happening mostly in Asian countries. So Asian countries include starting from Iran. So Iran is also a hotspot for earthquakes. So Iran, Japan, Sumatra, Indonesia, Himalayan region, all these countries are contributing to this database. Then if I talk about volcanic eruptions, the volcanic eruptions are mostly coming from Asia again. So where are these countries? These are from Philippines, Indonesia, uh, mostly from the island countries in the Pacific Ocean. Okay, and then you see meteorological disasters, droughts, floods. Okay, let us see the floods. So the flood statistics again, Asia is on the top, 1,155 numbers. Okay, And okay, so other disasters include chemical accidents, hazards. Again, Asia. So Asia is also known as the hotspot for natural disasters. So you look at the numbers here. Everywhere, most of the disasters, Asian countries are actually on top of the list. Uh, I had the chance one time. I went to Philippines. And then Philippines, there was an agency which is known as Pagasa, and then Philbox. So both these countries are working actively in order to mitigate the disaster that starts from volcanic eruptions and then typhoons. Okay, there itself, the country they call Philippines is a supermarket for disaster, natural disaster. So you talk about any disaster, you will find a place where it has been happening in Philippines. So there is not any disaster that you will not find in Philippines. So, for example, if we're talking about floods, flood is prevalent there. Even drought is there. There is a volcanic eruption there. Tsunami also affects. Then wildfire. So mostly all those disasters in a very small country of Philippines, and then it is very difficult for them because the population is also very high. The density of people are much in Philippines compared to other island countries. So Asian context, since we have a large number of people and then countries are also hotspots for natural hazards, people see often higher figures of natural disasters there. Okay, so again going back to the impact. So natural disasters, as I said, the impact, um, or I can shortly say NDI, can be defined as constituting the direct, indirect, and intangible losses caused on the environment and society by a natural disaster. So here are a few things that you should be focusing or paying attention is direct, indirect, intangible, or the other of the intangible is tangible losses. So, what are the direct losses? Suppose you talked about an incident of an earthquake. Okay, so if there is an earthquake that comes and hits a particular area, uh, can you think of a direct loss? So even if you do not know what the direct loss is in your understanding, what do you think is the direct loss? So direct loss is something that you directly physically see, visualize, and then you can feel the impact quite soon. Okay? So that means if there is a building standing there and then there was an earthquake, the building collapsed. So the direct physical loss is the vanishing of the building or whatever associated cost it had with the building because the building is gone. Same thing can be talked about in case of people. So casualties, then losses. So if someone lost his leg, someone lost one of the arms, or the part of the building is gone, the roads are gone, those are direct losses. Okay? So what are the indirect losses then? Hmm? So
Losses which occur after,
yes,
after many
yeah,
time and
yes. So indirect losses actually are not immediately felt. So that means if you have a road that is connected by a bridge, okay, and then the bridge is damaged. So you had a shop on the other side of the bridge, and then no one actually is able to come to your site in order to deliver you the needed items in order to run your shop. So in subsequent period of time, you will be losing the kind of revenue that you expect to earn from your business. Okay? And for that, there would be again an increase on that part of the road where the bridge was there. So these are some of the losses which are not immediately felt, uh, but due to the disruption or due to the activity that the bridge was damaged, the bridge damaging of the bridge itself is a physical loss, which is a direct loss. these indirect losses have set in. Okay, so these are a kind of secondary losses which are a result of the primary losses or the direct losses. Okay, so one example is that the damaging of the utility services and local businesses, okay, or loss of revenue, increase in cost, expenses connected to the provision of assistance, lodging, and drinking water. So, drinking water facility, if there are no drinking water now being supplied to a part of the town, then people will be suffering of the diseases. Okay, they will start drinking water from here and there, and in the event they will suffer from many other diseases. So that diseases is due to the diseases they will suffer in their health, and those kind of losses will be indirect losses. So this the triggering loss is due to an earthquake, which resulted in the damage of a bridge or damage of a road or damage of a building, and then because of that, indirect losses will set in. Okay, so these are two different categories of losses. Even if you just throw in glance or then try to analyze by yourself, then you can find or put all the losses into these two baskets quite easily. But again, there are other two different kinds of losses which people often try to categorize. One is known as a tangible loss, and the other one is known as an intangible loss. So, what is a tangible and what is an intangible loss? So, if you open up the English dictionary, tangible is what is a tangible? Tangible is something you can touch, okay, something you can feel, something you have to feel or you can touch. So again, the same category of losses can be either put into these two baskets of tangible losses or intangible losses. So, for example, if there was a building, this building is gone, it means you physically see the building gone. Okay? The building was something that you could have touched, you have felt that thing. So, that loss is a tangible loss. But then, what is an intangible loss? Okay, so suppose that building, there was a shop. I had a shop in that particular building. And then, since the building is damaged, my shop is gone, my business is gone, I that loss is being translated into some sort of a problem in my home or in my family. Okay? So for that, suppose I could not earn, I could not pay the fee for my children, I could not earn the bread that was supposed to be earning. Because of that, if my family is suffering in some or the other ways, that is a kind of intangible loss. Or because of that, if my psychological front is hampered, I have gone into depression, I have gone into some sort of withdrawal. I don't want to do any kind of work. Even people become suicidal. So these are losses which are intangible. That means these kind of losses you cannot directly see or directly feel. Okay, like the building collapse itself. So the same kind of impacts or the losses. First of all, it can be categorized into direct losses or indirect losses. Then you can categorize those into tangible or intangible losses. So there may be examples of plenty of this kind of losses. You just need to question it yourself. Okay. So anyway, we'll be going across a lot of some kind of definitions of these kind of losses. Okay. Again, this in terms of impacts. So as I said, there are four categories of impacts. But these categories are not really very hard and fast categories, so there is not a very broad, very concrete definition. So as I said just in the beginning of this subject itself, this is an emerging subject, and then people try to interpret in their own ways. So physical impacts means what are the impacts? So physically that you can see, verify, or you can uh, assess. So this kind of impacts we can say as physical impacts. So, okay, so on the screen, on the right hand side, you see a satellite image. So, I don't know if you can see this. So this on the screen here on the top right. So this is one river which is known as Chaukaya River. That is a river that is flowing across Thailand. It is also known as the heartline of Thailand. Okay, so this river, starting from the northern city, and flows through the middle part of Ayutthaya and then flows back to Bangkok and finally South China Sea. So in 2011, there was a huge flood that came in Thailand. I was even there during the flood. So on the right hand side of the screen, you see the same area which has been captured and there were flood waters on the ground. So we have this advantage nowadays because of remote sensing and then the satellite technology, you can see the overall picture of the ground. So the left hand side is the normal time, right hand side there is the high time of flood. As I remember, it came in around 21st of October. We had to run from our campus where we were studying and then I had to flee to the southern part of the city. And you see the water everywhere. So these provinces are mostly some of the provinces known as Anthong, Ayutthaya, or just just in the north of Bangkok city. So that point of time, what I am saying about physical impacts, so after the floods or during the floods, people could see many buildings collapsing, many infrastructure damage, roads which were useless. There will be marketplaces which people no longer could use. There are institutions or even colleges or universities which were just flooded, and then for months and months people were not being able to use those. So in terms of impacts, these are physical impacts which could be physically verified. Okay, so these will include some injuries, or if some people died, those will also be counted. So one of the common things why people get killed during the flood, particularly in urban areas, is because people try to walk across those streets, and then the streets underlying there are live wires. People are killed because of electrocution. So there are a lot of incidences during 2011 when I was there in Thailand. Many people, almost every day, extreme the news, people were getting killed because of electrocution. So these are physical effects. You can see, you can verify. Okay, people get permanently disabled. Sometimes, if you fell inside a drain, if you fell somewhere off the cliff for some reason during the floods or during any kind of disaster, you may get permanently disabled. So subsequently, people may be getting burns. It is quite common after an earthquake or when the floodwaters recede. Then, if you are not careful enough to drink water, and then if you're not careful enough to eat uh, food, then obviously you may fall ill. That is why some of the prevalent diseases after floods are like cholera or gastroenteritis, which are mostly related to water. So this kind of things set in, and then you can physically verify the impacts. Okay, how many people are getting killed? How many people are suffering in diseases? How many people have physically lost their hands or limbs? And then how many people are suffering due to sanitation problems? Together with pregnant mothers, there may be miscarriages uh, because of this natural disasters. Together, it will also accompany fatigue or loss of sleep. All these things, you have the statistics behind all these things which the government data can directly give you. So these are physically verified. You have a number, you can account all these numbers for, you can go and verify. So these are mostly categorized into physical impacts. But again, you may argue that yes, from this particular list also, this is not a complete list. You can add on to this list. I'm just giving you a few of the examples, and then there are some of these from where you can put this same uh, example in social problems or social impact itself. So this is quite common, and then you can go and verify. So this kind of impacts are known as physical impacts. Okay, so the other figure is from, or the other picture is coming from 2015, I think 2015, during the Nepal earthquake. So you see the number of houses which are damaged, flattened, partially collapsing. So all these things can be counted. So that's why these are all a part of your physical impacts, which can be seen and verified. Okay. Then there are impacts which ultimately will be translated into monetary values. So how much money is being lost in the process? How much money or revenue you could have earned, or the country could have earned, or how much is the hampering of the country's domestic growth or the gross domestic product. So that is an impact which we can put in the basket of economic impacts. So it will also include the loss of livelihoods. Many of the businesses, now even in the pandemic, the small businesses, many of them are now completely erased. People have lost their livelihoods. Just you don't have to go too far. Many people who were just living from hand to mouth by on a daily basis, selling some sort of small restaurant, they are now completely gone. So what have happened to their families? What have happened to their earnings? Their earnings have suffered. In terms of money, it can be calculated. Likewise, small businesses, it has gone. Now, for the last 2 years, the kind of employment the country should have generated has been hampering because of the corona pandemic. Why? Because there were not enough, how to say, entrepreneurship that has been taking place. Government has not been able to even open it up for business. The people are not investing enough in order to grow their businesses. So in that case, many people are remaining unemployed. Otherwise, under normal situation, this level of unemployment would have not been there. Okay, so can be calculated in terms of money. So if you were unemployed, you were not earning money. That means indirectly you were losing money. So that way you have an economic impact. Loss of property. That means if building is gone, if a bridge has been damaged, you have to again invest into restoration. Okay, if sometimes land is gone, so again, you will have to go and look for a piece of land. So a classical example where land is being lost is you don't have to go too far. The riverbank erosion. So sometimes when you stay near a river or a big river like Brahmaputra during the lean periods or even during the time when there is a high flood, there are plenty of photographs or videos. You will see that the river is eating the banks. That means erosion is taking place in those areas. And then those are areas where people actually use to cultivate, or people had their property which were documented. So these land, once it is gone into the river, that means you cannot really reclaim those lands. That means it is being lost forever. So what will happen to those people whose lands are being lost? Where will they go? How will they start again a new livelihood? What will happen to their normal income? Okay, so together with the land, there would be loss of production because in those places probably you were or somebody was using it for growing paddy or some other crops. So if there is no land, then definitely there would be loss of production, and together there would be loss of public infrastructure. Okay, so these things are a little bit, if you just introspect or devote a little bit of time, it will emerge to be clearer. Yes. Ah. And then all these things can be categorized into economic impacts. Okay, so again, I'm showing one graph and then showing the statistics of all those disasters in the world since 1965. Which are the costliest disasters in terms of money that has been lost? So on the top of the list, there is 2011 tsunami that came in Japan. Okay, earthquake and tsunami. So you see, Japan is a developed country. It has money to spend. It had quite expensive infrastructure. That is one of the reasons why it is one of the costliest disasters. So in terms of economic losses, it is almost $230 billion. That was in the year 2011 itself. So nowadays this value would have been really higher. Or if you translate this into current monetary value, it would be much more, even 1.5 times this 230 US billion dollars. So the lighter colored areas are the ones where you see the insured loss. That means this part of the money people can reclaim, but the greater part actually will be not being able to reclaim. And then this amount of money has been lost forever. Okay, so I think we are about to be closing our session because time is running out. Uh, I hope until I continue. Uh, Mm, or just I'd like to continue in my own pace until this is allowed. Okay, and then we can again resume by tomorrow morning. Then again, you see the Kobe earthquake. So why it is mostly expensive in Japan? Because Japan is a developed country. It has huge infrastructure which are costlier. So that is one of the reasons the economic damage is mostly higher in developed countries. The third one is the Katrina hurricane that came in the New Orleans part of the United States in 2005. See, this is coming in third because all these countries are developed countries. And then they have money to spend. The damages to the infrastructure is costly for them. Then US again, then China, then Italy. So even India, there are, or in Asia, India is a part of Asia where you can see a lot of disasters. Our name is not shown here because we are, our infrastructure or whatever amount of damage that is being incurred in India in terms of monetary loss is nowhere compared to the loss that has been incurred in these developed countries. Okay, China, Indonesia, even Indonesia is at the top. So there is another story to this economic loss, how a country emerges from the economic impacts. So there are different theories, and I would like to show you with a video by tomorrow how you spring back from a disaster or what would be the greater economic impacts in the long term uh, after a disaster. Okay, so for the time being, I think I don't know. It will not permit us to go further beyond this time. So tomorrow we will meet again. Then hopefully can discuss the remaining part of the course. Okay. So by the way, tomorrow maybe I have to go to the university at some point of time. In that case, I'd like to reschedule the class maybe in the afternoon. So it will only be obvious